Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we sift through a whole stack of sources, articles, research, notes, really dig in to pull out the key insights. Basically, we give you a shortcut to being genuinely well-informed. Today, we're heading into some really fascinating territory. We've got this rich collection of conversations, insights from a really diverse group of experts. Think neuroscientists, top athletes, psychologists, historians. Quite the mix.
Yeah, it's a great collection. And our mission, really, for this deep dive is to try and unravel some of those complex dynamics of, human behavior, personal growth, what success looks like in this constantly changing world we're in. We've gathered perspectives on, pretty much everything from how our brains work on a subtle level, right up to the big stories, the narratives that shape whole societies.
So as we unpack all this, you'll hear some, I think, surprising things about what really motivates us, how we can actually cultivate mastery in our own lives, and also get into some practical strategies for navigating relationships, society, the whole picture. We're going to try and connect some dots you maybe haven't seen connected before, all aimed at helping you understand those deeper forces, both in your own life and, out there in the world. Okay, so let's kick things off. Let's explore that inner engine, what actually propels us forward. Drive. A lot of us probably think motivation is, chasing pleasure, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the sources we looked at ain't a much more nuanced picture. Starting with dopamine, what did we find there?
Right. That's a really crucial distinction. We often talk about dopamine like it is pleasure, the feel-good chemical. But one neuroscientist we looked at explains it's actually more like a desire pathway.
Desire pathway.
Yeah, so think of it less as the pleasure you get from the cookie and more that insistent craving for the cookie. It's the brain anticipating, pushing us toward future rewards, that constant more feeling. So it's not really about the satisfaction of having, it's the relentless drive of wanting. And that's vital because it means fundamentally our brains are kind of wired for pursuit, maybe more than contentment.
That really reframes things. So it's the chase, the anticipation. But it's not just about quick fixes or getting praise from others, is it? Our sources really seem to stress that genuine, lasting drive comes from inside.
Yeah.
How did they suggest we move away from chasing those external high fives, as one source put it, towards cultivating that internal reward?
Exactly. That point came up again and again. External rewards. They feel good for a moment, sure, but they don't build that deep internal motivation. They fade. Then you need another hit. Real drive, the sources argue, comes from, the satisfaction, the effort itself, mastering something, achieving a goal you set, whether anyone else notices or not. It's about building this self-reinforcing loop where just doing the work, pursuing excellence, that becomes the reward. And the sources were really clear. Like you said, you don't just get a raise for passion. There has to be action behind it. Those high fives, they have to be earned through real effort, real results.
That's a powerful point.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think about people who achieve, truly exceptional things, consistently top performers. Our sources suggested that getting to number one and staying there often seems to require, something maybe bordering on insanity, or at least a deep, deep obsession. What did they say about that extreme drive?
Yeah, that was a really strong theme, this idea of balance or normality. It often just doesn't seem to apply to the outliers, the truly exceptional ones. We saw one legendary athlete describing himself as obsessed, even crazy. He genuinely believed he could, quote, outwork his potential.
Outwork his potential.
Yeah, it wasn't about coasting on talent. It was this relentless, unwavering commitment to practice day in, day out, often with the explicit goal to, his word, annihilate opponents. It's that single-minded focus, maybe hard for others to grasp, that sets them apart.
That level of obsession sounds incredibly effective, obviously, but I wonder, did the sources touch on downsides? Is there a point where that insanity tips over, becomes destructive? Or is it always productive for these folks?
That's a fair question. It's definitely a double-edged sword, and the sources do hint at that. Obsession fuels greatness, yes, but it can absolutely lead to burnout or isolation, or just a totally skewed life balance if it's not channeled somehow. But for the individuals we looked at, it often seemed tempered. Maybe by a really clear sense of purpose or, and this is fascinating, by transforming negative energy. Which brings us to another really compelling idea from the research, how feelings like anger, frustration, bitterness, how they can actually be turned into fuel for positive change.
That's a really interesting link. Tell me more about that transformation. How does something like anger, which we usually see as negative, destructive even, become a pathway?
Well, one expert described these negative emotions not as roadblocks, but as a potential pathway to transformation. The idea is that the sheer intensity of these feelings holds raw energy that can be redirected. We saw this play out in the story of a world-famous athlete. For years, he was driven by this really intense, anger-fueled competitiveness. But crucially, he didn't just let it explode outwards destructively. Over time, he learned to channel that fire, that initial dark energy, into something bigger, a higher purpose.
So not just winning.
Exactly. Not just winning championships for the sake of winning, but using that drive to inspire people, to help others. He talked about how his dark energy was metamorphized into something really positive, using it for a worthy cause, like justice, he said, instead of just dominance.
That's a really powerful example of redirecting those inner forces. Okay, let's shift gears a little. Let's talk about cultivating mastery, the actual practical skills for growth. Across pretty much all our sources, one theme just kept coming up: the huge importance of self-awareness and curiosity. What does that look like day to day, according to these experts?
It seems absolutely foundational. Self-awareness, really knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, your fears, your insecurities. It's not just navel-gazing, right? It's critical for dealing effectively with other people, too. We saw one leader who learned that really understanding his teammates' insecurities was key to helping them perform at their best. Not to exploit them, but to address what was really going on under the surface.
Addressing the underlying stuff.
Yeah. And another intellectual talked about grappling with this deep terror of his own deceit, which points to just how deep that self-examination needs to go sometimes to build real intellectual honesty.
That level of honesty, especially with yourself, sounds intense. And you mentioned curiosity as a superpower. How did the sources show that playing out?
Oh, absolutely. Curiosity is like the engine for growth. We heard about an athlete who was just relentless in asking questions of basketball legends. Not just how do you do that move, but why?
Deeper questions.
Yeah, defensive tactics, how they read the court, their mental game, just constantly probing, trying to understand every little piece of their craft. And similarly, another source talked about how a high school teacher ignited his curiosity in writing. But not just for writing's sake, it was a tool to understand emotions better. Curiosity driving this deeper inquiry into, well, what makes people tick?
That inner drive to really know, really explore.
Yeah.
It's clearly vital. But, real lasting growth rarely happens in a flash, does it? Our sources really hammered home the power of small steps, incremental improvement.
Oh, completely. That idea of the overnight success, the dramatic transformation, it's mostly a myth, according to our sources. They consistently point to the power of very small changes, incremental changes, micro habits, you could call them. These things compound over time. It's like a slow burn, not a big bang. Think of pushing a heavy flywheel. Those first pushes seem to do nothing but keep at it, and eventually that thing has huge momentum.
That's such a great visual, and it fits perfectly with the athlete's story, the one who struggled physically at 12, but just through sheer consistency of work, year after year, caught up and then excelled. It wasn't sudden, it was the grind. Like that entrepreneur noted, we tend to overestimate what we can do in 1 year and underestimate what we can do in 10 years. It really speaks to the daily rigor. And you mentioned neuroplasticity earlier, the brain changing with experience. How do those tiny wins actually physically reshape our brains? What did the sources say?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff. Neuroplasticity basically means your brain isn't fixed. It's constantly rewiring itself based on what you do, what you experience, what you focus on. So when you engage in that daily rigor, when you rack up those tiny wins, practicing a skill, learning something new, pushing past a small hurdle, you are literally strengthening the neural pathways for those actions and thoughts.
You're actually changing the wiring.
Exactly. You're building new connections, pruning away less useful ones. You're making those processes more efficient, more automatic. It's a physical calibration. So consistent effort doesn't just build habits. It physically sculpts your brain for mastery in that area.
That makes the effort feel so much more tangible, more meaningful. Knowing you're actually rewiring things. Okay, and building on that idea of pushing ourselves, success often lies outside the comfort zone. Right? The sources definitely explored that mindset of embracing discomfort, stepping into the unknown.
Yes, absolutely. It seems to require this willingness to step into uncertainty, to face things that feel hard, maybe even impossible at first glance. One really celebrated figure, his whole approach was basically, I don't know if we can do it. Awesome, let's see.
I love that.
It totally reframes uncertainty. It's not a wall, it's an invitation, an adventure really, a chance to learn what you're capable of. It's about being curious about your own limits and then, nudging them.
That perspective shift, seeing challenge as exciting, that's huge. And we also looked at that security strategy, getting off the X. How does that fit in as a metaphor for handling discomfort or the unknown?
Right, getting off the X. It comes from security training, self-defense. The X is the point of immediate danger where an attack starts, the most vulnerable spot.
Yeah.
The idea is, don't just stand there. Move immediately.
Create space.
Exactly. Create space, disengage from that point of maximum danger, then assess, then decide how to react strategically. Metaphorically, it's a great life lesson. Know when to pull back from immediate conflict or overwhelm. Create mental or emotional space to think clearly rather than just reacting on impulse. It's about saving your energy for the right battles.
Strategic withdrawal almost.
You say that. And speaking of challenges on the entrepreneurial side, we heard why it's actually good for founders to fail miserably, especially early on.
Fail miserably. Sounds rough.
Yep.
But I guess there's a reason it's called free learning. Why is that?
It's considered free learning because those early failures, yeah, they sting, but the stakes are usually lower. You haven't bet the whole farm yet. You're getting direct feedback from the real world, from the market, not from a textbook. It's raw, it's fast, and it teaches you essential stuff about what doesn't work, who your customer really is, what your product actually needs to be. That kind of brutal hands-on education, it's seen as invaluable and way cheaper than a massive flame out later on when you have investors and reputation on the line.
The tough lesson, but makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift focus now to relationships and the wider societal picture. The sources really stress the absolute bedrock of good relationships, personal or professional. Truth and clear communication.
Yeah, absolutely paramount. One expert really emphasized the immense value of just telling each other the truth. Even when it's incredibly difficult, like negotiating sensitive topics, say sexual desires within a long-term relationship, things people are often really hesitant to bring up, the argument is that holding back, even trying to protect feelings, ultimately erodes trust. It prevents real understanding. Radical honesty, as long as it's done with care, can actually build much deeper connections.
But it's not just about bluntness, right?
Yeah.
Because we also explored how being too direct can just make people shut down, get defensive, especially in leadership, the idea that you need to build a relationship first, show you care before delivering criticism.
Exactly right. Truth without empathy. So that can be really damaging. As one leader put it, if your team genuinely knows you care about them individually and about the overall mission, they'll go to the ends of the earth for you. That relationship, that trust built on demonstrated care that has to come first. Without it, even fair criticism feels like an attack. People get defensive, they disengage. It's about creating psychological safety, an environment where truth can actually be heard, not just dumped on someone.
That flows really nicely into the next point. Understanding and managing egos and insecurities, particularly when dealing with people in positions of power. Those hidden dynamics can really shape interactions, can't they?
Oh, profoundly. One of the most practical takeaways was learning why understanding your boss's hidden doubts might be lesson number one.
Lesson number one. Wow.
Yeah, because everyone has insecurities, right? But for people in charge, those doubts can get amplified by the pressure, the responsibility. And if you accidentally poke at those insecurities, even unintentionally, it can backfire badly. Knowing where those potential sensitivities lie helps you navigate conversations much more skillfully. You avoid unnecessary friction, you build a better working relationship.
That insight really highlights the difference between genuine leadership and just manipulation, doesn't it? Manipulation is self-serving, often plays on those insecurities. But authentic leadership, it seems, is about genuinely caring for the team, the mission, building trust. How did the sources talk about that difference?
They really drew a clear line. Manipulation uses fear, maybe deception, to get compliance for your benefit. Authentic leadership inspires commitment through trust and a shared purpose. When a leader genuinely shows they care about their team's growth, their well-being, and about achieving the goal together, people aren't just punching the clock, they're invested. They'll push harder, be more creative, solve problems because they believe in the leader and what they're doing together. It's about empathy, really understanding their world, their challenges, and showing up.
Okay, zooming out even further now. Our sources looked at how our collective beliefs, our societal structures are shifting. Social media obviously plays a huge role here. One historian even wondered if we're heading towards a world where nothing is true.
It is a pretty sobering thought. This historian suggested that the way we're constantly pushed into tribal camps, pressured to declare allegiance on every issue, especially online, it just pulls us apart. Information stops being about verifiable facts and becomes more about, well, which team you're on. And this fragmentation, unfortunately, is often profitable. Platforms thrive on that high engagement, often polarized, emotional content. It creates these echo chambers where different views aren't just debated, they're often seen as completely illegitimate or malicious.
Yeah, you see that everywhere. And within that shifting landscape, we also touched on things like status drives, how people change their spending after a crisis by signaling goods. What were the sources saying there?
It's interesting. After tough times, like a recession or maybe even a pandemic, people often start spending more, maybe disproportionately, on things that signal status, signaling goods. These aren't just for practical use. They're about communicating something to others. I'm okay, I've recovered, I'm successful. They're visible markers to reestablish your place, your identity, maybe show resilience after adversity. It's a way of reasserting normalcy and position.
That's a really fascinating look at consumer psychology. And then on an even wider societal level, there was that striking research about how even really subtle cues can potentially manipulate political beliefs. Can you remind us of that example?
Yeah, that was eye-opening. One study found that something as simple as having hand sanitizer visible nearby could subtly shift people towards more conservative political views.
Hand sanitizer? Seriously.
Seriously. The theory was that it unconsciously primes a sense of threat or disgust, which are emotions often linked to more conservative responses or a desire for order and boundary protection. It just shows how easily our conscious beliefs might be swayed by things we're not even aware of, how fragile our sense of pure objectivity might be, which ultimately led to that really insightful analogy in the sources. Society needs both an accelerator and a brake, like a car. It needs both liberals and conservatives to function.
That is a powerful analogy. Not about right or wrong, but about needing both dynamics for balance, for movement, for stability. Wow, okay, what a deep dive that was. We've gone from the wiring of our brains, dopamine, personal drive, explored how obsession can fuel greatness, how those tiny consistent efforts build mastery, all the way through to the nuances of relationships, managing egos, and these big, complex forces shaping society. Understanding others' worlds is just as key as understanding our own.
Absolutely. And this whole exploration, it isn't just abstract theory, is it? It's really a toolkit, a way to understand yourself better, understand the world around you. It offers real insights into motivation, how to grow, how to navigate this incredibly interconnected, complex life we're all living. Recognizing these currents is powerful.
So building on all that, here's something for you, the listener, to maybe chew on. If truth itself can be seen so differently by different groups, and if social media really does amplify these divides, creating this environment where even subtle things might shape our beliefs without us realizing, how do you personally go about forging your own understanding? And what responsibility do you feel you have for what you put back into that collective conversation, that evolving perception?